We are going to be talking about advanced color schemes. So I'm giving you guys a university education for free. I've talked about normal color schemes in the past, like the very basic color schemes. So I'm not going to go too intense with the basic ones. I'm just going to go over them again. So this one is achromatic. Achromatic is really easy. Achromatic just means there is literally no color. So some people would say like, oh, this is monochromatic. This is actually not monochromatic. This is achromatic, which means that there is no hue whatsoever. So this is black and white. The next one that's considered basic is the monochromatic scheme, which is just one hue. So if I were to just kind of continue with this, it's the same blue, right? If I chose this blue, it's the same one, right? I don't shift anything on the hue wheel at all. I just change the value. So it's just the value of the same hue is shifting over and over. That's what monochromatic is. So monochromatic does have hue. Achromatic does not have hue, right? Achromatic has like absolutely no color to it whatsoever. It's completely black and white, but monochromatic will have hue. Next color scheme that you've probably heard of is analogous. Analogous is basically just a few colors on the wheel next to each other. It's usually 3 or more. So if we have red, the next color might be an orange. And then if I want a little bit more, then it's like a red orange, and I shift it a bit more, and then it's a yellow orange. Then I shift a bit more, and it's like a yellow. It's like if we're moving in one direction across the color wheel. So they're all kind of clumped together. They usually look really good together. It's the same deal anywhere on the color wheel. Say if we started with blue, we might start shifting over towards the green. So if we go blue, cyan, green, that kind of general direction. Or if we go in the other direction, we could go blue, violet, magenta, red, kind of that general direction, right? But they all have to be next to each other. Those colors tend to look really, really nice next to each other. It's very hard to mess up an analogous color scheme. Like, you can't. There's almost no way to mess up an analogous color scheme. And that's why a lot of people like them, but they can get really boring. So it just depends on what you want. Complementary. This is the one that I love. Complementary colors are colors that are directly across from each other. This wheel over here is an RGB wheel, so not an RYB, which is the one that you are probably used to, right? In school, they teach you the color wheel. What are the primary colors? Red, yellow, blue. That's not true. Red, yellow, blue are the primary colors of your RYB color wheel, which is a very traditional, outdated wheel. Generally, when we work with digital work, we look for the RGB wheel instead. So your primary colors are now red, green, and blue. And then the same with CMYK, which is the contemporary artist's wheel, which your primary colors then would be magenta, cyan, and yellow. We're working with RGB right now though, so complementary are the colors that are directly across from each other on the wheel. My favorite complementary combination with RGB is red and cyan. A lot of people don't like red and cyan. I love red and cyan. So it's two colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel, and generally, even though they're complementary, we want to make sure that they're fairly balanced so they're not too harsh on the eyes. So usually you want one color to be kind of dull, a little bit darker, the other color to be a lot brighter. That brighter color will be generally where your eyes lead to first, because it is a lot brighter and will be used in a lot of smaller amounts. Think of any kind of, oh my god, what's it called? Think of any kind of concept art that you'll see in like video games. If you think of like God of War, Detroit Become Human, all that fun jazz. If you look at any of their concept work, the color scheme that you'll see the most often is the complementary schemes, and it's most likely going to be yellow, blue, orange, cyan, kind of around that area. It's always going to be that, where the orange or the yellow is like a very small amount, so everything else is going to be like a dull, dark blue. That's a very common scheme. You'll notice that. That's like the concept artist's favorite scheme ever. So Triadic they'll make an equilateral triangle on the color wheel. Most people, when they think Triadic, they think of the RYB wheel, which, you know, would be like red, yellow, blue would be a Triadic scheme. That's a traditional Triadic scheme. Technically, a more modern one would be magenta, cyan, yellow, if we go off of the contemporary artist's wheel. So it'll make an equilateral triangle. It'll be either your 3 primaries, your 3 secondaries, 3 of your tertiaries, because there is more than 3 tertiary colors. Okay, the last one is split complementary. This is the CMYK wheel, so this is what it looks like in terms of where the colors go. So split complementary, so you know how normal complementaries work. So if we had cyan and orange directly across from each other, instead of it being directly across, you go across and then you split it up. So you get these 2 colors. So instead, the 3 colors within this scheme would be cyan, yellow, orange, and red. So that would be your color scheme. Instead of directly across from one another, it would take one and then split it off. That's your split complementary. So your split complementary, if I were to take this color scheme, it's the same deal with complementary. You gotta pick your colors that are a little bit brighter, and those will be your accent colors, while the others remain as underlying colors. So those are our basic schemes. So this is the new stuff. This is the stuff that you get in university education. I love these schemes. I was a really big fan of them. The first one we're going to be talking about is my absolute favorite. I'm a huge fan of this scheme. This first color scheme is called the double split complementary. It's a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit more intense. So double split complementary, if we have blue or cyan and orange again, This time, if we took blue cyan, or cyan blue, I guess, and then yellow orange, this is our double split. So double split is taking 2 of the adjacent colors. It makes like a kind of thin X on your color wheel, right? And it creates this nice balance sort of deal. Right, so a double split complementary is very similar to a split complementary, but both sides are split. So it creates this thin X across the board. So it's a little more nuanced, a little bit more detailed, and then adds more depth to your pieces overall. If you're just working with a complementary, you're just working with 2 colors. Split complementary, you get 3, but you know, it's still not in depth enough. But double split is the one that most game artists use. You'll see that a lot. A lot of game artists love double split, and they work with this scheme. So it's these 4 are the ones that they use the most. And double split is a lot of fun. You get like this really nice kind of nuanced, really, you get a lot with medieval kind of fantasy games. I think that Dark Souls uses that a lot too. But you get that really nice kind of like contrast between these 2 colors, and it really feels like they clash against each other, but like in a really nice way. But yeah, so double split, if I create a palette based off of this.
If you'd like to support the channel and the creation of free arts education, become a member on Patreon.
So it gives it a little bit more depth. The next scheme, this one is really hard to work with. I had to work with this one during school. And my prof was like, you gotta learn how to organize it. I'm like, sir, how do I organize this scheme? So this scheme is the polychromatic scheme. This scheme sucks. I love it, but like, it sucks. I'm not kidding. This color scheme is every color under the rainbow. So a polychromatic scheme, if I was to take a look at this wheel, it would be yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta, orange. That would be your color scheme. It'd be using all 6 of those, like right across the wheel. So this is the polychromatic color scheme. Makes a star on the color wheel, and it uses all primaries and secondaries. So this one is extremely colorful, obviously, and tough to get right. And that's because the polychromatic scheme requires you to have a good sense of how to balance your colors out. Because if you don't, then your colors will feel like rainbow vomit, and that's like not what you want, right? So you want your colors to feel organized, and knowing how to organize your colors takes a lot of knowledge with color theory and like balancing your color temperatures and whatever. So polychromatic's one of those schemes that I don't recommend using until you're like pretty familiar with your colors. Next one is Tetradic. This one's a really cool one. This one's weird. So Tetradic scheme is a slightly wider double complementary, slightly wider. So if I took this scheme that's in front of me, right, if we took the wheel, you know how split complementary was like you pick one and then there's 2 extras on the other sides, right? This time it creates a wider X. So if we took these colors across from each other, if you went complementary and then took their splits on either sides, that's what the Tetradic scheme is. So Tetradic is these funky colors on either side. So a Tetradic scheme is a slightly wider double complementary, so it creates a wider X on the color wheel, right? So this is a much more colorful and bright version of all the other complementaries that we've seen previous, right? Tetradics are what you see with more E-rated games. Think about the splash art for like Mario, or even Kirby. Kirby as well. Like the splash art for Kirby, a lot of Kirby art uses this. So it's these 4 right here is what you see a lot with Kirby art. Mario uses these ones. The ones that I have circled right now are very Mario-esque. You'll see a lot of those more E-rated games using a Tetradic scheme, because Tetradics are easier to make very bright because they're wide enough away from each other where the contrast won't be too jarring. So it creates this nice, bright, bouncy, colorful scheme. You can leave these at almost complete max hue and they'll still feel just okay because of how bright and bouncy they are. Last one. This one isn't really a scheme. This one just takes a bit of explaining. This is why I don't really need the wheel for this one. This one is called Discordance, or a discordant color scheme. I'm gonna need y'all to answer a question for me, right? So if I take this yellow, choosing between this yellow and purple, yellow is obviously the weaker. If you were to blend these 2 together, that yellow would get lost in that purple, right? So violet in this case is a much stronger color compared to the yellow, right? We look at this violet, it's very, very strong compared to the yellow because the yellow will get washed away. Discordance is switching these 2 around. So if we took a discordant color scheme, we would make this yellow the stronger color and the purple the weaker one. It's switching up the color strengths. Does that kind of make sense? Discordance is something that you add on to previous color schemes. Like the colder colors were overpowering the warmer colors, and that's just because that's how it would be normally. Because normally blue is a stronger color compared to these bright colors, right? But with Discordance, it switches it around. So if we took this yellow hue, this is still yellow. Remember that brown is just a derivative of yellow to red, right? If we took this kind of color, and if we took our yellow and made it the stronger color compared to the purple, that becomes Discordance. You could do this with any colors. It's just yellow and violet or purple are like have the strongest contrast. So it's taking value strengths of your colors and switching them. So that's what this is called, your value strengths. So your value strengths are just how strong it is with its values, right? A lighter values, like a really, really light gray, really light colors are weaker than say like your blacks, right? White will not do too much to a black, like, right? So when we take our value strengths of our colors, you switch them around. So if violet generally has a heavier value strength compared to yellow, you flip it around. So then your value strength of your purple is no longer stronger than the value strength of your yellow. But yeah, so that's what discordance is. And discordance isn't really something that you use separately compared to the rest of the color schemes. That's why it's like, yeah, it's there, but like, you know, it's not like a whole other color scheme. It's just something you add on to the other ones.
Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, here's a couple other videos you can check out next.